You cannot break a spirit that has already survived the worst storms the world has to throw at it. Join us for the epic tales of modern-day titans who rose from the ruins to claim their victory. Click subscribe now and find your own unbreakable spirit today.
Me. Grandmother's handwriting was small and deliberate. Every letter leaned slightly to the right, like she was always pressing forward into the next word. I knew that handwriting better than I knew my own. I had watched her fill out birthday cards, grocery lists, and crossword puzzles my entire life, so when I saw the signature at the bottom of the power of attorney document, I knew. That was not her handwriting. I was sitting at my kitchen table at 11:30 on a Tuesday night in a bathrobe, surrounded by a paper trail my family thought they had buried. My grandmother had been gone for 4 months. The grief was still raw in the back of my throat, the kind that ambushes you in grocery stores when you see the brand of crackers she liked. But grief was going to have to wait. I had work to do. My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 31 years old. I spent 5 years as a paralegal at Harmon & Beck, a mid-size estate litigation firm in Columbus, Ohio, before I passed the bar and became an associate attorney specializing in probate fraud. People hire me when they suspect someone has manipulated a dying relative into changing a will. I've seen every variation of financial predation a family can commit against its own. I have watched grown adults cry in my office about forged signatures and altered documents in last-minute deed transfers. I have rebuilt paper trails that other people thought were gone forever. I never imagined I would have to do it for myself. My grandmother, Ruth Whitmore, owned a duplex on Elm Street in Westerville that she had maintained for 34 years. She rented the bottom unit and lived in the top. The property was paid off, worth approximately $390,000 by last year's market. She had told me about it specifically at her kitchen table. This summer I turned 22. She pressed my hand between both of hers and said, "Claire, I want you to have the duplex when I go. You're the one who will take care of it." She had always known I was practical. She had always known I was the one who showed up. My brother Marcus had not been to visit her in 4 years before she got sick. I was at her bedside when she was diagnosed with early-stage dementia in January. I was the one who reorganized her medications, set up automatic bill pay for her utilities, and drove her to appointments every other Thursday. My mother, Diane, swooped in when the prognosis got serious in October. My father, Gerald, followed. Marcus flew in from Phoenix 2 weeks before she died. I thought nothing of it at the time. Families gather at the end, it is what they do. What I did not know was what they were doing during those 2 weeks while I was at work, while I was handling the logistics, while I trusted that the people who claimed to love Ruth Whitmore were simply sitting at her bedside saying goodbye. The will was filed for probate in December. I was not in it. The duplex had been transferred via power of attorney to Gerald and Diane Whitmore 3 weeks before my grandmother died, when she was on a level of medication that made her unsure of what year it was. The transfer document listed Marcus as a witness. The notary stamp was from a UPS store location in Westerville, a place my grandmother had never visited in her life because her knees made long walks difficult and she preferred the post office 2 blocks from her house. My mother called to explain. Her voice had that careful softness she uses when she knows she has done something wrong but has prepared her justification in advance. "Your grandmother wanted the family to decide together," she said. "She was confused at the end, Claire. She would have wanted this." I said, "Okay, Mom." I said it quietly, with no inflection. I got off the phone, sat very still for about 4 minutes, and then I opened my laptop and started pulling records. "I want to explain something about what it feels like to apply your professional skills to your own family's betrayal. It is not clean. It is not like solving a case for a client, where you can maintain a kind of clinical distance, where the injustice belongs to someone else and you are the instrument of correction. When you are reading a fabricated document that bears your grandmother's name, and you know it is fake because you have her real signature on 40 years of Christmas cards in a shoebox in your closet, something cracks open behind your sternum that does not close again. But it also focuses you. Grief and rage are fuel. I have seen it in clients. I understand it now in a way I did not before. I started with the basics. I ordered a certified copy of the deed transfer from the Franklin County Recorder's office. I obtained the original will my grandmother had filed with her attorney, Douglas Crane at Crane & Associates, in 2019. That will was explicit. The duplex, in full, to Claire Ann Whitmore, with the remainder of the estate divided equally among her children. I called Douglas the next morning. He was polite and careful, the way attorneys are when they are managing something delicate. He confirmed that no updated will had been filed through his office. He also confirmed that he had not prepared or notarized the power of attorney document. He had not been contacted by my grandmother or any member of my family during the final 2 months of her life. Someone had found a different notary. I drove to the UPS store on Schrock Road on a Thursday afternoon. I brought a photograph of my grandmother. I asked the manager, a tired-looking man named Phil, if he remembered processing a notarization for an elderly woman in late October. He looked at the photo for a long moment. He shook his head slowly. "I'd remember," he said. "We don't get many notarizations, and I've never seen this woman." He pulled up the log for October 23rd, the date on the document. One notarization had been processed. The client name in the log was listed as R. Whitmore. The notary on duty that day had been a part-time employee who was no longer with the store. Phil gave me her name after I explained, carefully and without editorializing, what I was investigating. Her name was Tanya Sloan. She had worked at the UPS store for 6 weeks last fall. Phil said she had left without notice in November. I found Tanya Sloan on LinkedIn. She was listed as a freelance administrative assistant. I found her phone number through a public records search. When I called, she picked up on the third ring. I did not identify myself as an attorney. I said I was calling about a notarization she had performed last October. There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that contains information. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, and hung up. That pause told me everything. I filed a complaint with the Ohio Secretary of State's Notary Division. I sent a certified letter to my parents' home address outlining what I had found and requesting a voluntary return of the property. I gave them 14 days to respond. I kept the letter factual, stripped of the specific pain I felt writing it, clinical as a surgical cut. My mother called me that night, crying in a way that was meant to be heard, that performance of grief she had always used to redirect a conversation away from accountability. "You're going to destroy this family," she said. "I didn't start this," I said, and I hung up. Marcus called the next day. He did not cry. He was more direct. "You don't want to do this, Claire. Think about what it'll look like. Grandma wouldn't want you dragging this through court." I noticed he did not say the document was legitimate. I noticed he did not say Grandma had changed her mind. He said it would look bad. He said Grandma wouldn't want it. People who invoke the wishes of the dead to protect their own interests always make the same mistake. They assume the living cannot speak for themselves. "I have a handwriting expert who has already reviewed the signature," I said. It was slightly ahead of the truth. I had contacted Dr. Angela Marsh at OSU, a forensic document examiner I had worked with on 2 previous cases. She had agreed to review the documents. I did not have her written report yet, but I would. "I also have a statement from the notary's former employer confirming your grandmother was never physically present at that location, and I have Douglas Crane prepared to testify about the original will." The silence on Marcus's end lasted so long I checked to make sure the call had not dropped. "She was confused," he finally said. "She wasn't herself. That's actually the argument that will hurt you most in court," I said. "If she lacked testamentary capacity, then the power of attorney is void on its face. You can't have it both ways." He hung up. Dr. Marsh delivered her written report 11 days later. It was definitive. The signature on the power of attorney document showed several markers of simulated handwriting, inconsistent pen pressure, unnatural tremor patterns, inconsistent with organic age-related tremor, and letter formation that deviated from the authenticated exemplars I had provided. Her conclusion: the signature was not written by Ruth Whitmore. I added the report to the binder I had been building. By then it was 73 pages. Certified deed transfer. Original 2019 will. Douglas Crane's sworn statement. The UPS store notary log. Phil's written account. My documented attempts to reach Tanya Sloan. The forensic handwriting analysis. Bank records showing my parents had collected the October and November rental income from the duplex's lower unit. Money from a property they did not legally own. When you work in probate fraud long enough, you stop thinking of documentation as paperwork. You think of it as architecture. Each document is a load-bearing wall. By the time you are finished, the structure is so solid that the truth cannot be dislodged. I scheduled a meeting. I sent emails to my parents and Marcus with a subject line that read, "Regarding the estate of Ruth Whitmore, required meeting." I gave them a date, a time, and the address of a conference room I had reserved at my firm's satellite office in Westerville. I told them Douglas Crane would be present. I told them a representative from the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office had been informed of the situation and was monitoring developments. That last part was true. I had called the Economic Crimes Unit 2 weeks earlier. A detective named Priya Shetfield had listened to me for 40 minutes and asked focused, methodical questions. She had not made any promises, but she had not dismissed me either. She asked me to keep her updated. My mother called 4 times after receiving the email. I let all 4 calls go to voicemail. My father sent a text message that said, "This is unnecessary. We are family." I did not respond. Marcus did not contact me at all, which I interpreted as the reaction of a man consulting his own attorney. The morning of the meeting, I woke up at 5:30, which is not unusual for me on high-stakes days. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table with the binder open to the first page and read through everything one more time, not because I had forgotten anything, but because I needed to feel the full weight of it before I walked into that room. Sometimes you have to let yourself feel the thing before you can put it away and do what needs to be done. I thought about the last real conversation I had with my grandmother. It was a Sunday in September, 6 weeks before she died, before the worst of the decline. I had brought her soup, and we had sat in her living room with the afternoon light coming through the curtains she had made herself in 1987. She had been sharp that day, sharper than she had been in weeks. She had held my hand again, the way she always did, and said, "Don't let them talk you out of things, Claire. You always know when something isn't right. Trust that." I closed the binder. I got dressed. I drove to Westerville. My parents arrived 7 minutes late. My mother was wearing a blazer I had never seen before, the kind of thing you wear when you want to look serious. My father had his hands in his pockets and the practiced expression of a man preparing to negotiate. Marcus did not come. I noted that immediately. His absence was a form of testimony. Douglas Crane was already seated at the table when they arrived, his reading glasses on, a copy of the 2019 will in front of him. He did not stand to greet them. My mother scanned the room and fixed on me with that look she has always used to establish maternal authority in a situation. "Claire, I really think we should have handled this privately." "Sit down, please," I said. She sat down. I think it was my tone. I've spent years in conference rooms watching attorneys establish control through economy of language, and I have learned that tone is everything. I did not say it with anger. I said it the way a surgeon says, "Scalpel." It was a technical instruction, nothing more. I placed a copy of the binder in front of each of them. Page 1 is the certified copy of the deed transfer filed October 23rd, listing Ruth Whitmore as the grantor and Gerald and Diane Whitmore as grantees, executed via power of attorney. Page 3 is the original will prepared and notarized by Douglas Crane in 2019, designating me as the sole recipient of the Elm Street duplex. Page 7 is a sworn statement from Douglas confirming he did not prepare or witness any power of attorney document for my grandmother and was not contacted by her or any family member in the final 2 months of her life. My father opened his mouth. I held up one finger. Page 12 is the notary log from the UPS store on Schrock Road showing a notarization was processed under the name R. Whitmore on October 23rd. Page 14 is a written statement from the store manager confirming that no elderly woman matching my grandmother's description was present at the store that day. Page 17 is my documented attempt to reach the notary on duty, Tanya Sloan, who terminated the call upon being asked about the notarization. My mother's blazer was very still. Page 22 is the forensic document examination report prepared by Dr. Angela Marsh, a certified handwriting expert at Ohio State University. Her conclusion is that the signature on the power of attorney document is a simulation of Ruth Whitmore's handwriting, not the authentic writing of Ruth Whitmore herself. I have highlighted the relevant sections. I watched my father turn to page 22. I watched his jaw tighten. Page 31 is the bank statement showing 2 months of rental income from the Elm Street property deposited into an account held jointly by Gerald and Diane Whitmore, beginning November 1st, income from a property you were not legally entitled to hold. Derived from a fraudulent transfer document. That constitutes theft by deception under Ohio Revised Code 2009-13.02, in addition to the forgery charges under 2009-13.31. My mother looked at my father. It was the look of two people realizing simultaneously that the ground they were standing on has been engineered by someone else. "Claire," my father said. His voice had changed. The negotiating posture was gone. "Your grandmother was confused. She told us she wanted the family to manage the property together." "She didn't write that signature," I said. Dr. Marsh's report is 70 pages of scientific evidence demonstrating that. So whoever she told and whatever she may have intended in her confusion, the document used to effectuate that intention was forged, and a forged document has no legal standing regardless of anyone's intentions. "You're going to send your own parents to prison," my mother said. Her voice broke on the last word in a way that I recognized. It was the same break she used when I was 16 and had confronted her about reading my journal. It was calibrated to produce guilt. I had spent 31 years letting that break in her voice redirect me. I sat very still and let it pass through me like weather. I'm going to recover the property my grandmother intended for me, I said. What happens to you depends entirely on what you do next. I turned to the last tab in the binder. This is a settlement agreement prepared by Douglas Crane. It transfers the Elm Street property back to me immediately, repays the 2 months of rental income collected, and commits you to cooperation with the notary fraud investigation. In exchange, I will not pursue criminal charges directly. The notary board investigation is already in process and I cannot stop that, but I will not be the complainant in a criminal filing. I slid the agreement across the table. You have until 5 o'clock Friday to sign it. If you do not sign it by Friday, I file a civil suit Monday morning and I call Detective Shetfield at the Economic Crimes Unit and tell her I am ready to move forward. Douglas Crane removed his reading glasses and set them on the table with a small click that filled the silence. My mother was crying in earnest now, the kind of crying that was no longer performance but something underneath the performance, something real that had been hiding behind the theatrical version. My father was staring at the settlement agreement with the expression of a man doing mental math and not liking any of the answers. Where is Marcus? I asked. He was a witness on the document. His exposure here is significant. He got a lawyer, my father said quietly. Good, I said. His lawyer should review pages 58 through 63, which document his signature as witness to a document that has now been determined to be forged. His attorney will understand the implications. I stood up. I picked up my copy of the binder. I loved her too, I said. I had not planned to say it. It came out of somewhere I had not been monitoring, and once it was out, I let it stand. I was there every week for 2 years. I drove her to every appointment. I held her hand when she was scared and didn't know what year it was. And you walked in at the end and took the one thing she specifically told me she wanted me to have, so yes, I'm pursuing this. I looked at my mother once, directly, the way you look at something you are deciding how to remember it. Then I walked out. My father signed the settlement agreement on Thursday afternoon, 14 hours before the deadline. My mother signed 40 minutes after him. Marcus's attorney called Douglas Crane on Friday morning and negotiated a separate agreement that included Marcus's cooperation with the notary board investigation and the identification of Tanya Sloan's involvement in exchange for a limitation of his own liability. Tanya Sloan was located in Gahanna, where she had taken a bookkeeping job. The notary board revoked her commission and referred the matter to the Franklin County prosecutor. She was charged with notarial misconduct and forgery in March. My parents were not charged criminally. That was the deal I offered and I held to it. Not because I had forgiven them. Forgiveness is a longer road than any legal proceeding, but because my grandmother would not have wanted her children in handcuffs. I knew that about her even if they had forgotten it. She was pragmatic. She believed in consequences, not spectacle. She would have wanted the property returned and the record corrected and everyone to sit with the weight of what they had done. That is a more durable punishment than anything a sentence could provide. The deed was transferred back to my name on April 9th, 4 months after my grandmother was buried. I drove to Elm Street that evening. I parked in the driveway and sat for a while. The tenant in the lower unit had left a small pot of tulips on the front step. The siding needed painting. The gutters were full of last fall's leaves. It needed work. I knew how to do work. I got out of the car and walked up the front steps of a house that belonged to me, and I stood at the door for a moment before I unlocked it, holding the key Ruth Whitmore had pressed into my hand the summer I turned 22. The one she had hung on a red ribbon so I would always be able to find it. You're the one who will take care of it, she had said. She had known me better than any of them ever had. I opened the door and went inside. In the months that followed, I rebuilt the binder into a case study that I now use when training new associates at my firm. I redact the names. I walk them through every document, every strategic decision, every moment where the case could have collapsed if I had moved too quickly or trusted the wrong instinct. The lesson I emphasize most is the one that took me the longest to believe about myself. Your expertise does not stop applying simply because the person who wronged you is someone you love. The work is the same. The truth does not change shape to accommodate your grief. My mother and I have not spoken since the conference room. My father sent me a text on my birthday in June that said, "Happy birthday." I replied, "Thank you." That is where we are. I do not know yet if we will ever move past it. There are days when I think about the version of my family that existed before all of this, and I feel something shapeless and heavy in my chest. There are other days when I walk through the upstairs unit of the duplex, painting the trim, the same pale yellow my grandmother kept it, and I feel entirely clear, like the inside of a room just after you've opened all the windows. Marcus and I have not been in contact. His attorney and Douglas Crane handled everything between them. Someday that will need to be addressed. I am not ready for that day yet. What I know is this: my grandmother built something over 34 years and she wanted it to continue in hands that would care for it. I understand now, in a way I could not have before all of this, what it costs to build something and what it means to protect it. I understand what she saw in me when she pressed that key into my palm and said those words. She saw someone who would show up, someone who would do the work, someone who would not be talked out of what she knew was right. The tulips the tenant left are on the kitchen windowsill now. I water them every other day. They have been blooming since April, longer than tulips are supposed to bloom, which feels like something. I am not a sentimental person by training, but I water them anyway, every other day, in the house that belonged to a woman who knew me, in the house that belongs to me now.